I used to be that guy. You know the one, the safe bet? I was a senior engineer at Amazon, a principal architect at Samsung, pulling in nearly $400,000 a year. On paper, I was the ultimate pragmatic choice for any woman looking for stability. I had the 401k, the prestigious title, and a career trajectory that looked like, well, a straight line to the top. When people looked at my life, they didn't see a person, they saw a fortress. But here's the thing about fortresses. They're only as strong as the ground they're built on, and I've watched that ground liquefy more times than I can count. I've seen the 2008 crash vaporize retirements in a single Tuesday. I've seen entire divisions full of stable people erased by a single corporate memo. Right now, I'm watching couples who married the safe tech worker in 2021 stand by as their stock options crater and their security evaporates in a wave of layoffs. That's the reality I've lived. Stability isn't a fact, it's performance art. It's a story we tell ourselves in the quiet moments between disruptions. We love to talk about Jane Austen and her heroines being honest about money. We celebrate the modern woman for finally being pragmatic enough to demand both a soulmate and a spreadsheet. But there's a massive, uncomfortable irony hiding in those spreadsheets. We've finally gained the financial independence to escape the economic traps of the 1800s, yet we're using that hard-won freedom to sprint right back into a different kind of cage. We're optimizing for variables that don't actually exist. We're building our houses on sand and calling it smart because the sand looks solid this morning. But what happens to the partnership when the pragmatic rationale vanishes? If you're choosing a partner based on their current power configuration, are you really making a move toward freedom? Or are you just playing a more sophisticated version of the same game Charlotte Lucas was forced to play 2 centuries ago? Maybe we've forgotten what the word troth actually meant. It wasn't about finding someone who had resources. It was a terrifying, sacred promise to stay when the resources were gone.
Wow, that opening critique is, it's devastatingly precise. It takes that that typical easy conversation we have about modern relationships.
Right.
And just drags it kicking and screaming into the unforgiving light of economic reality.
When you say stability is performance art, it cuts straight to the heart of this feeling so many of us have.
It does.
That the structures we rely on, whether it's, the banking system or the corporate job market, are fundamentally brittle.
It absolutely frames the challenge we're facing today. And I think our mission in this deep dive is to really understand the scope of what we might call the evolutionary mismatch.
Okay.
Human mate selection preferences are incredibly powerful.
They're wired.
They're hardwired exactly to seek resource stability. But those ancient preferences are now colliding head-on with the structural volatility of the modern digital economy.
So we have this deep biological impulse to find someone with a nice, big, predictable stack of resources, the fortress.
The fortress, yes.
But the fortresses are being built on seismic zones. And that's the thing. The problem isn't the impulse itself. The impulse is rational for survival. The problem is that the signals we are using to assess stability, they're fatally outdated.
So we're reading the map wrong.
We're reading a map from a different century.
Yeah.
We are selecting for yesterday's model of success in a world that operates on tomorrow's chaos. So we have to, stop looking at the static measures, the title, the current 401k balance.
Stuff in the spreadsheet.
All the spreadsheet stuff. And we have to start evaluating adaptive psychological resilience, which is a far, far more durable asset.
I wonder, though, how much of that impulse is still rational, even in a chaotic world? Even if that $400,000 salary collapses, starting over from that position is still a whole lot better than starting from zero with, 5 figures of student debt, right?
It's a fair point.
Isn't optimizing for that current stability still the most rational choice for risk mitigation, even if it's brittle?
Okay, so that introduces a really crucial layer of friction. And yes, you're right. Absolute resource levels do matter. But the relative security they offer is diminishing, and it's diminishing rapidly.
How so?
The question isn't just how much money does he have? It's become, what is his capacity to regenerate that money when the system that produced it vanishes?
I see.
If a person's entire identity, their entire skill set is tied to one specific brittle system, their collapse, when it comes, is often total, and it's paralyzing. And that paralysis, that lack of adaptive capacity, that is the real risk factor you're betting on.
Okay, so we need to understand the environment that's causing the systemic fracture. For a while, we've used the VUCA framework to describe this shifting landscape.
We did. And VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, was, a pretty perfect snapshot of the world after 9/11, or with the rise of globalized supply chains. It did a good job of articulating what the environment was doing.
Right. It told us the world was messy.
Exactly. Volatility meant rapid change, uncertainty, and inability to accurately predict the future. Complexity was all about the interconnectedness of all the moving parts, and ambiguity was just a lack of clear data. It worked for a time.
But not anymore.
Well, it just doesn't seem to capture the extent of the breakdown we've seen recently. After events like the pandemic, the explosion of AI, and all this persistent geopolitical disruption, a lot of thinkers argue that VUCA is insufficient.
It's not enough.
It's too focused on the external characteristics of the market. We need a framework that captures the systemic breakdown and, crucially, the human emotional toll. This is where the successor model BANI comes in.
BANI. Okay, let's break this down. Brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. I have to say, that feels like the defining psychological landscape of the 2020s.
It really does. And brittle is probably the easiest one to grasp. It means that systems that look strong on the surface, like a perfectly optimized global supply chain or a highly specialized, very highly paid career path, are actually incredibly fragile.
They have no give.
They have zero tolerance for error. Under pressure, they don't bend, they shatter. Look at that senior engineer from the opening monologue. A high six-figure career built on a very specific, maybe non-transferable skill set within a single volatile industry.
It looks like the definition of stability.
But one corporate memo, one market shift, can vaporize it. The fortress is built of glass.
And anxious. That speaks to the internal state, the feeling of living inside these brittle systems.
The anxiety is pervasive. It's the feeling you get when you realize that stability is an illusion. You enter this state of constant low-grade unease. You see this in couples who have, on paper, achieved financial independence, yet they're still obsessively tracking layoff news.
Always planning for the other shoe to drop.
Constantly. They never feel truly safe. And the cognitive load of perpetually managing that uncertainty creates a constant stress that just eats away at your psychological bandwidth.
So partners are less able to handle even minor relationship stresses.
Of course, their emotional reserves are already depleted by all this external chaos.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, nonlinear is where it gets a little more complex. What does nonlinearity look like in a relationship context under BANI?
Nonlinearity means that cause and effect are totally disconnected. In time, in proportion, in every way. Small actions can have these huge, disproportionate, and often delayed consequences.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Think about a small, unresolved conflict within a partnership. In a stable world, you address it, you apologize, you move on.
Right.
In a BANI world, that small argument might combine with the husband's suppressed anxiety about an impending layoff and the wife's exhaustion from managing childcare during a sudden school closure.
And suddenly it's not a small argument anymore.
Suddenly, that little spark hits all this dry kindling and it escalates into a catastrophic, non-recoverable breakdown. The outcome is in no way proportional to the initial cause.
The system has zero shock absorbers. So a little nudge causes a massive reaction. And the last one is incomprehensible.
Incomprehensible goes beyond simple ambiguity. Ambiguity is, we don't have enough data. Incomprehensible is, even with all the data, we can't make sense of it.
The rules themselves have changed.
The complexity is so great and the data is changing so rapidly that we simply cannot process or understand the situation using past experience. For example, the market shift caused by generative AI isn't just fast. It's fundamentally rewriting the rules of human productivity in a way that has no historical analog.
And when faced with that, people freeze.
They freeze, or they retreat. They rely blindly on outdated metrics, which is precisely why people cling so desperately to those static wealth signals. It's the only thing that feels solid.
So BANI reframes this whole thing not just as external market movement, but as a systemic fracture that demands new psychological tools from the people inside it. And this inability to rely on old stats or credentials leads us right back to that evolutionary lag in our mating preferences.
We have to confront this evolutionary conflict. Ancestrally, selecting a mate who provided stability and resources was the only path to successful reproduction and survival.
It made perfect sense.
It was the most rational choice. And this deep-seated drive translates today into the impulse for hypergamy, the desire to select a partner who can provide equal or greater resources to ensure future well-being. But that mechanism evolved for environments where resources were stable and predictable. Who was the best hunter? Who owned the most fertile land?
It evolved for a slow, physical, resource-constrained world.
Not a fast, digital, hyper-volatile one.
And the stories we're seeing now are the direct result of this. this catastrophic mismatch.
Exactly. I mean, take the story as Elena, a marketing director, and David, a senior developer. Elena was the definition of the modern pragmatic woman. She wasn't just looking for romance. She was looking for a partner in life and, a partner in a spreadsheet.
And she found David?
She found David, who offered the textbook definition of modern security, senior credentials at a legacy software firm, a hefty six-figure salary, even a mortgage-free flat. This was the ultimate static wealth signal.
The castle, the external structure was perfect.
It was perfect on paper. But when the digital economy rapidly shifted, when the whole market moved aggressively toward AI-driven solutions, David's firm, built on these rigid, specialized legacy systems, it just folded.
And his specific credentials, which were worth so much a year earlier,
suddenly became irrelevant. But the key here isn't just the financial downturn. It was the total psychological collapse that followed.
Right.
His entire identity was inextricably linked to his title and his salary. When the structure that validated his expertise dissolved, he spiraled into a profound identity crisis.
He didn't know who he was without it.
He had no psychological elasticity to pivot or retrain or even market his transferable skills because his self-worth had been totally outsourced to his employer's brand name.
And that's the mismatch in a nutshell.
It's the perfect illustration. Alina selected for the current snapshot of wealth, the castle, which was immobile and brittle. What you actually needed was the ability to generate wealth under duress. She needed a builder.
A builder might have fewer immediate assets, but they have the raw capacity to create shelter, regardless of the materials available. That ability is the durable asset, while the castle is just. It's a temporary structure.
And we have to move away from viewing that current resource level as the primary signal, because it's such an unreliable predictor of long-term success, which unfortunately leads us into the even bigger problem of deceptive signaling mechanisms.
The kind of signals that scream stability but are actually designed to mask fragility.
Precisely. Let's consider another case, Chloe, who is navigating that, high-stakes corporate elite mating market where signaling is everything. She dated a guy named Julian.
Okay.
And his life was a masterclass in traditional economic signals. Expensive watches, a prestigious title in high finance, an ostentatious apartment in the city, exotic trips. He projected absolute long-term success. He was that modernized Austin-esque expectation of a reliable financial match.
So he was signaling wealth and status, and by the logic of signaling theory, that should be costly and therefore reliable. But in this BANI world, that cost is often just leveraged debt.
That is the critical insight. Julian's stability was a deceptive mechanism. It was built entirely on high leverage debt and a status that was transient and completely dependent on market euphoria.
So when the market turned,
when macro-sociological disruptions hit the financial sector, a sudden interest rate hike, a major global event, his status just evaporated. The expensive watches, the luxury car, they were all built on borrowed future earnings, not proven durability.
the signal was expensive, but it was hollow. It communicated current access to credit and transient status, not inherent earning potential or character. And I'm guessing his character also failed when the pressure mounted.
Not only did his financial structure collapse, his internal structure completely dissolved. Under pressure, he just defaulted to self-preservation. He lacked the loyalty or the character to remain present in the partnership.
He saw her as an asset.
He essentially viewed Chloe as an asset he could no longer afford or sustain, rather than a partner to lean on during shared difficulty. The very balance sheet that people rely on as the safest long-term predictor, it proved to be the least reliable factor in the storm.
That is a chilling realization for anyone who bases their selection criteria on these visible success markers. So if the external signals, whether it's static wealth like David's job, or these deceptive signals like Julian's lifestyle, are unreliable or brittle, then we have to look deeper. We need to understand what makes a signal trustworthy in the first place.
And that brings us directly to signaling theory.
Right.
Signaling theory, which comes from both economics and evolutionary biology, really provides the framework here. And the core principle is actually quite simple. A signal is only credible if it is costly, if it's genuinely difficult for a low-quality individual to obtain or imitate.
Let's talk about the classic biological example, the peacock's tail, the handicap principle.
The peacock's tail is a biological marvel and an economic nightmare. It's huge, it's cumbersome, it makes the bird incredibly vulnerable to predators.
Which is a huge liability.
A massive liability. It requires enormous metabolic resources that could be spent on, survival, just to grow and maintain. It is, by all accounts, a terrible adaptation for day-to-day living.
But it's an irrefutable proof of health.
It's the ultimate costly signal. The peacock is effectively screaming, I am so healthy, so dominant, and so efficient at surviving that I can afford to squander vast resources and take massive risks just to prove it to you.
And if it were easy to grow?
If growing that tail were cheap or easy, every week, sickly peacock would have one, and the signal would instantly become meaningless. The cost is what guarantees the fidelity of the information.
Okay, so let's apply that to the job market. Michael Spence's model of job market signaling says the college degree works not because of the specific information you learned, but because of the cost it represents.
Exactly. The degree acts as a costly signal to employers. Its value isn't just the tuition money, it's the psychological cost, the 4 years of delayed gratification, the discipline required to endure tedious assignments.
The commitment to a long-term goal.
It proves the applicant possesses discipline, intelligence, and resilience. All these hard-to-observe traits that are incredibly valuable to an employer. This is the heart of the sheepskin effect, the economic premium you get from the degree itself, even if the actual coursework wasn't directly job-related. It signals endurance.
The degree proves you can sustain effort over time and withstand boring, high-cortisol work for a future reward. Okay, let's explicitly apply this incredibly useful principle to the mating market. If the costly signal is what we should be selecting for, then what is the equivalent of the peacock's tail or the sheepskin degree in a potential partner?
It is the demonstrated capacity for intentionality and sustained effort. The low-quality, high-risk partner is the one who optimizes for frictionlessness, the easy path. The high-quality partner is the one who demonstrates the ability to incur high-cost psychological, temporal, emotional for a long-term goal.
And the failure of modern dating tools
is that they have systematically destroyed the ability to screen for this costly signal.
And when the cost of signaling approaches zero, the fidelity of the signal also approaches zero, which leads us right into George Akerlof's Nobel Prize-winning concept, the market for lemons.
Akerlof's model is so critical here because it explains why dating, when it's structured like a commodity market, fundamentally selects against quality. In the used car market, the seller have all the information. They know if the car is lemon.
Right.
The buyer, fearing the worst, discounts their offer. This price depression drives out the sellers of the good cars, the peaches, because they can't get a fair price.
So the very structure of the market actively punishes quality and rewards deception. And modern dating apps, which are designed for scale and frictionlessness, have inadvertently created this precise structure for human connection.
They really have.
So what's the unobservable quality? What's the lemon in the dating market?
It is character, genuine intent, and long-term loyalty. These are the non-observable qualities. You cannot tell from a photo and a brief profile whether someone is truly looking for a commitment or just short-term validation, or if they'll flee when their career collapses.
So since you can't see the quality, you have to assume the risk of a lemon, which leads to adverse selection.
Precisely.
Let's break down the incentive structure that creates this lemon market on the platforms, starting with, say, the male user's incentive.
Okay, so since a significant portion of profiles are inactive or the users are just there for ego validation, the ghosts, spending significant time crafting a thoughtful, personalized message is a statistically terrible investment.
The return on investment is basically zero.
The user who spends 20 minutes on a single message risks a 0% return on that time. So the rational strategy to maximize the expected value of the platform is to cast the widest possible net with the lowest possible effort. That user becomes a spammer, the system punishes high effort and rewards volume.
And this high volume of low-effort spam then hits the female user, creating what you call notification blindness.
And an unbearable cognitive load. For a high-quality user who is genuinely seeking a meaningful connection, the signal-to-noise ratio is just intolerable. She's faced with thousands of zero-cost signals that convey zero information about intent.
So what does she do?
The rational response is either to stop checking her inbox entirely, or, if she is a truly high-quality user with other options, to just leave the platform altogether.
And when the peaches leave, the inventory degrades.
Which leaves more lemons, which further incentivizes the spamming behavior, which lowers response rates even more, and the whole cycle just reinforces itself into the ground.
And the root cause is the zero-cost signal.
It all comes back to that. A swipe costs 0 calories, $0, 0 psychological effort. Therefore, it conveys 0 information about the sender's character or intent. The platform, in its pursuit of efficiency and engagement, completely destroyed the costly signal that's required to screen for durable qualities.
So we are, in essence, using commodity market tools optimized for speed and frictionlessness to solve what is fundamentally a high-stakes hiring problem.
That is the core realization. Dating is a high-stakes matching market. It is structurally identical to hiring a co-founder for a company or selecting a lifelong business partner.
You can't just buy the outcome.
You have to be chosen back. And the cost of a catastrophic failure, a difficult divorce, a painful breakup, choosing a partner who just collapses under stress is absolutely ruinous, both emotionally and financially.
And given that the cost of a bad fit is so incredibly high, a rational system should prioritize intense, high-fidelity screening. But dating apps optimize for the exact opposite. You would never hire a CEO based on 3 photos and a quick text exchange.
It's a wild irony, isn't it? We have higher screening standards for entry-level positions than we do for finding a lifelong partner. I mean, the job market requires resumes, interviews, background checks, references.
A whole process.
We need to re-import this architecture of intentional friction back into dating.
And some of the early platforms used to do this, right? They had long-form profiles that functioned like resumes. They had psychometric questions, compatibility scores. They felt tedious, but maybe that tediousness was the feature.
That friction was the filter. The sheer effort required to create a detailed, thoughtful profile acted as a rate limiter. It ensured that only users who were serious about finding a match even bothered to apply.
By removing the friction, the platform shifted the cognitive cost of filtering from the platform itself
Where it belongs.
to the user, who is often the woman dealing with the resulting flood of noise.
Right. So the solution isn't to make dating faster or easier, but to reintroduce friction as a necessary and frankly desirable feature. If expressing interest costs effort, it immediately increases the quality of the signal.
So what would that look like?
Well, if a platform mandated long-form profiles or required psychometric screening, and maybe, most importantly, required significant effort in messaging, like a mandatory personalized explanation of why you want to go on a specific date, it would force intentionality.
It would shift the whole system.
It moves the system from a high-volume, low-signal equilibrium to a low-volume, high-signal one. And now, you can reliably judge a person based on their demonstrated willingness to incur effort, which is a powerful proxy for their intent and character.
But here's the friction point we have to address. The super stimulus trap. You're asking users to choose the gym high cortisol work focused on a long-term reward over the slot machine, the high dopamine entertainment that offers instant validation.
And the current apps are highly effective Skinner boxes. They run on variable ratio reinforcement schedules that are designed to mimic a gambling addiction.
They're designed for dopamine hits, not deep connection.
Right. The frictionless design is essential to keeping that loop alive. Why would you choose effort when you can choose instant, albeit very shallow, validation?
I guess the answer is because the superstimulus offers an artificial heightened version of the reward, the validation, without any of the nutritional content, without the genuine connection.
You can consume 5,000 calories of validation on these apps and still feel spiritually starved for a real meaningful connection.
And that starvation is what you call dopamine tolerance.
I think so. I think a critical mass of users have become desensitized to the quick hits and are now ready to prioritize quality. But they need a platform that reflects that intent. And this whole realization that character and resilience are expressed through high-cost signals, that brings us to the durable metric we should be looking for, anti-fragility.
Okay, let's unpack this crucial concept from Nassim Nicholas Taleb. We've established that stability is performance art, and resilience only brings you back to a vulnerable baseline. We need something that actually benefits from the shock.
Taleb provided the perfect trichotomy for surviving chaos. Fragile, resilient, and anti-fragile. And understanding the distinction is the key to selecting a partner who is genuinely durable in this BANI world.
Okay, let's start with fragile. That's the system that breaks under stress. We already have a clear picture of that person in David, the former senior engineer.
Yes. The fragile partnership or mindset is fundamentally flawed. Any challenge makes it weaker or destroys it entirely. Taleb characterizes the fragile person as the naive rationalist, the person who believes that because something hasn't happened in their lifetime, it never will.
They can't imagine a different reality.
They avoid novelty, they base all their plans on previous statistics, and they confuse the absence of proof with the proof of absence. They expect the world to operate predictably, and when volatility hits, they are shattered because their entire mental model of reality collapses.
They believe in the fortress because it's always been standing, and they refuse to consider the liquefying ground beneath it.
Exactly. Then we have resilient. A resilient system resists shocks and then returns to its original state. A resilient partnership can weather a financial crisis or a job loss, and they'll bounce back to where they were before. Resilience is good, but it only protects the status quo. It consumes energy just to maintain the baseline.
So if a shock hits, the resilient person takes the hit, absorbs it, and expends all this effort just to get back to zero. They don't lose ground, but they don't gain anything either.
Which is where anti-fragility transcends both. The anti-fragile partnership actively benefits from volatility, from disorder, from stressors. It thrives, grows, and gets stronger when exposed to challenges.
How does that work in practice?
It sees a job loss not as a tragedy, but as an essential opportunity for creative reinvention. It sees a conflict not as a fight to be won, but as a chance to stress test the communication system and upgrade it. Anti-fragility views chaos as necessary input for continuous improvement and evolution.
That reframing of challenge from adversity to opportunity, that has to be the most profound mental shift a couple can make. If you select for anti-fragility, you're selecting for a partner whose default setting is continuous improvement under duress.
And this mindset isn't passive. It's not something you're born with. It's built through specific psychological and behavioral shifts. And we can sort of organize the development of anti-fragility into 3 key areas: perception, action, and courage.
Okay, let's start with perception, how you process the shock in the first place.
Perception is about removing the emotional, subjective judgment from difficult events. When volatility strikes massive expense, a sudden loss, the fragile partnership reacts with blame or despair or victimhood. They ask, why me?
Which just adds psychological debt to the real problem.
Precisely. The anti-fragile shift, which is deeply stoic in nature, is seeing things simply and straightforwardly, stripped of judgment. This event is neither good nor bad. It simply is.
It's the shift from the victim mentality of why me to the creator mindset of the practical question, okay, now what needs to get done?
Exactly. That reframing transforms external adversity into internal advantage. You stop wasting energy on resentment, and you focus all available capacity on finding the solution. That clarity of perception is the first step toward growth.
And the second area is action. Once you've perceived the problem as a neutral challenge, what does an anti-fragile response look like in practice?
It requires deliberation, boldness, and persistence. It demands that partners develop a clear vision of what a better future could look like post-challenge. The anti-fragile couple doesn't just manage the crisis, they ask, how could this crisis be turned into an opportunity to upgrade our finances, our skill sets, our relationship dynamics?
This sounds like that builder mentality again.
It is. It necessitates trying new things, looking for micro wins, and systematically building on every small success.
So it's not about avoiding mistakes. It's about guaranteeing that every mistake generates valuable data for improvement. You fail forward.
Yes. The anti-fragile person learns and adapts faster, precisely because they don't fear failure. They see it as the required cost of acquiring data. If they try 3 new side hustles after a layoff and 2 fail, they haven't failed. They've simply narrowed the problem space and moved closer to the successful third option. That is an active, persistent, and deliberate approach to chaos.
And the final element is courage. This sounds like the hardest one to maintain during prolonged turmoil.
It is. And courage here involves working with humility and, crucially, with cheerfulness. Humility means acknowledging the situation without ego or denial. Cheerfulness is the commitment to finding common ground and prioritizing the greater good of the partnership, even when one or both partners are stressed or tired or afraid.
It's the commitment to not letting the external storm become an internal civil war.
That is the ultimate test. It's tied to what psychologists call adversarial growth or post-traumatic growth. The idea that what does not kill us makes us stronger is not a cliche. It's a description of an anti-fragile system that uses stress to harden itself.
So when the partners commit to facing adversity together,
they are propelled to a new level of emotional and functional unity that they would never have reached by just playing it safe. They find their full potential outside of their comfort zone.
this flips the entire selection criteria on its head. You're not selecting based on how easy their life looks now or how high their current salary is, but on the demonstrated history of how they perform when their life is demonstrably hard.
Which leads us to the shared survival strategy. We can see this illustrated perfectly in the story of Mia and Leo. Mia had spent years subscribing to the resource extraction model of treating potential partners like investment portfolios, just optimizing for the highest return on paper.
She was selecting for static assets, much like Elena did with David.
Exactly. But after realizing those relationships were hollow, she shifted her focus to an anti-fragility framework. And she met Leo. And Leo wasn't defined by a prestigious title or a massive portfolio. He was defined by his track record. He had survived multiple career pivots, had faced serious personal setbacks, but he always emerged with his integrity intact.
He was the quintessential builder, not the castle.
He was the builder. So what happened when the inevitable macro shock hit their situation?
Let me guess. They didn't break.
When the gig economy atomized and their community faced a major economic downturn, they didn't break up or even break down. They hardened together. Their financial strategy wasn't whose money is protecting us. It was how do we combine our capacities to navigate this new terrain?
Their shared survival strategy.
It emphasized mutual loyalty and adaptability as the primary currency, something far more valuable than their transient socioeconomic status.
That level of shared effort, that commitment to the greater good of the partnership, becomes the ultimate luxury in a chaotic, fragmented world. The relationship itself becomes stronger because of the volatility.
As Taylor would say, the relationship becomes a bonfire fueled by volatility, where a wind extinguishes a candle but can fuel a fire. The ultimate luxury isn't wealth accumulation, it is a partnership that demonstrably strengthens under stress.
Which completely redefines the concept we introduced at the very start. Troth. It was never just a purely romantic notion.
Not at all. It was clear-eyed, practical evaluation. Troth, that promise to stay when the resources are gone, becomes the most accurate, character-based predictor of long-term partnership success. The true selection process shifts to these practical evaluations of character.
Questions like, how does this person handle adversity?
Do they blame external factors or do they take ownership? Will they stay committed when things are hardest and you are vulnerable? These qualities, character, loyalty, resilience, these are the durable variables that don't just evaporate when the market shifts.
So let's pivot back to the start and address that central, crushing irony of modern choice.
The irony is profound, and I think it's one we have to face. Modern women gain financial freedom precisely to escape the economic necessity that trapped women like Charlotte Lucas 2 centuries ago. The necessity of marrying for money regardless of character.
Right. They gained the freedom to prioritize compatibility and enduring character, independent of financial desperation.
But instead of transcending that economic calculation entirely, many are simply optimizing for a more sophisticated version of the old trap. They're using that hard-won independence as a platform to demand current, brittle stability markers, the prestigious title, the specific stock options.
Effectively running right back into an economic cage that will soon shatter.
They are selecting for what looks good on paper today, ignoring the fact that in a BANI world, the paper can burn tomorrow. And the hard truth we have to accept is that character endures, circumstances change. Selecting for current circumstances means you're selecting for variables you cannot control, and that statistically will not last.
The fortress looked safe this morning, but it was built on liquefying ground. The only reliable factor in an unreliable world is the character of the person you've bound yourself to. Not their current job, not their assets, but their demonstrated anti-fragility under pressure.
Troth was the ultimate pragmatism. It was the acknowledgement that fortune rises and it falls, and the only enduring asset is the shared, committed intent to face that volatility together. We have the freedom now to choose this anti-fragile path. We just have to be willing to look past the alluring, temporary markers of static wealth and embrace the costly but ultimately durable signals of character.